The barracks fell into a tense silence, the kind that made your chest tight and your thoughts race. Sergeant Dalton's boots hit the concrete floor like gunshots, each step deliberate, echoing through the stillness. "Carter!" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Get your ass out here now!" Private Jay Carter's stomach twisted into a knot as he stepped forward. The guys were already snickering, the kind of low, mocking laughter that only men in uniform know how to make sound like a threat. Jay could feel their eyes on him, like sharks circling. They thought he didn't belong here. Hell, half the time, he thought so too. Sergeant Dalton's gaze locked onto Jay like he was the last piece of trash on the floor. "What the hell are you doing here, Carter? You think you're tough enough for this life?" Dalton sneered, eyes scanning Jay from head to toe, taking in every imperfection. Jay's boots weren't polished right, his shirt tucked in just a little too loose. To them, it was all the proof they needed. Private Carter can't even hold his own in a basic drill, let alone keep up with men who've got what it takes. Dalton mocked, loud enough for the entire platoon to hear. The snickers grew into full-blown laughter, the sound slicing through Jay's skin like barbed wire. His ears burned with shame. The drill sergeant's voice rang out again. "Why don't you just go back home, Carter? This is no place for someone like you." Jay stood there, feeling every inch of his body shrink under the weight of the words. He didn't answer. His lips pressed tight, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The last thing he wanted was to show weakness. He had to hold it together. But damn, it was hard. The others kept laughing as Jay forced himself to turn around, to walk back to his bunk. The room felt smaller now. He could hear their voices behind him, their whispers, their laughter. "Did you see his boots? He's not cut out for this, man. Bet he's counting the days till he can quit." As he reached his bunk, Jay kept his eyes straight ahead. His hands, though, trembled just enough to give him away, but only to himself. The air was thick, the tension unbearable. But there was something else in the room, too, a quiet presence that didn't mock him. Corporal Andrews, the guy who'd been in the military a couple of years longer than Jay, watched him from across the room. He didn't laugh, didn't join in. Just looked at Jay, eyes narrowed, but not in scorn. It wasn't much. A glance, a quiet acknowledgement, but it was enough. It made Jay's chest tighten in a way that didn't quite feel like shame. Maybe it was a little bit of hope, or maybe just the reminder that not everyone was out to tear him down. Later in the mess hall, Jay sat alone at the back of the room picking at his food. The others were clustered together, talking loud, mocking Jay in quiet whispers. A few of them passed him, muttering just loud enough for him to hear. "Look at him, man. He's just here for the paycheck. Never gonna make it that one." They didn't even look at him when they said it. It was like he wasn't even worth the effort to really notice, and it cut deeper than he'd like to admit. But he didn't show it. He just kept his head down, his body stiff as he took another bite, pushing down the anger and frustration that was building up inside. "What did you expect, Carter?" he muttered to himself under his breath. "You're not like them. They're better than you. That's the way it is." And for a second, he almost believed it. Then in the middle of all that noise, he heard a voice. It was low, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the chaos. "Hey, Carter, you okay?" It was Corporal Andrews. He was standing nearby, not looking at Jay, but just watching the rest of the group with a sort of distant expression. Jay didn't know how to answer, so he just nodded. Andrews didn't press, didn't try to talk him up or offer false encouragement. He just gave a small nod before turning back to his own food. There was something in that gesture, something that made Jay feel like he wasn't completely invisible, like maybe he wasn't alone after all. But the rest of the day wasn't much different. More drills, more laughs, more silence when Jay struggled to keep up, his legs burning, his lungs begging for mercy. Dalton was always there, watching, waiting for him to fail. Jay's body was starting to break down, his muscles aching in places he didn't know existed. But he kept going, kept pushing forward, because that's all he knew to do. Even though it hurt, even though he was embarrassed, there was this small, quiet part of him that refused to let the weight of their mockery pull him down. What did he have to lose? And yet, despite everything, he didn't quit. Not then, not ever. He thought that was the end of it. But then everything changed in ways I couldn't imagine. The next morning, the drill sergeant called out their names for a physical training test. Jay knew this was his chance, his one shot to show that he wasn't just another dead weight in the group. As the others prepared, Jay could feel the heat of their eyes on him, the mocking glances, the low laughs. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, he'd prove them wrong. And as he stood there, boots lined up for inspection, sweat beading on his forehead, he realized something. He wasn't doing this for them. He wasn't trying to win their approval. He was doing this for himself, and that was the only reason he needed. The whistle blew. The test began. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The morning air was thick with sweat and determination. The rain fell in a steady drizzle, soaking the ground beneath their boots, making the whole place feel like one giant mud pit. The guys in the squad were already grumbling, trying to wipe the water out of their faces, but it didn't stop the drill sergeant from barking orders. "Move it, Carter!" Sergeant Dalton's voice thundered across the yard. "You think the rain's going to stop you from running? You're going to drown in the mud, or you're going to run through it. Which is it?" Jay didn't answer. He couldn't. His chest was already burning from the first few laps around the perimeter, and the last thing he wanted was to face Dalton's ridicule if he even slowed down. So he kept running. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing he knew to do. Keep pushing, keep moving. The others were way ahead of him. They'd been faster, stronger. Hell, they were used to this. Jay wasn't. Not like them. His legs felt like they were made of stone, dragging through the mud with every step. "Come on, Carter," Dalton yelled again. "You know you're not fit for this. Just look at you. You're holding everyone back." The words stung, but Jay didn't let them show. He couldn't afford to show weakness, not now, not after everything. He'd made it this far by keeping his mouth shut and his head down, even when the ridicule was unbearable. But today felt different. He dug his boots deeper into the mud, trying to ignore the cramps tightening in his legs, the ache in his chest. He pushed harder, as if willing his body to keep up with the others, to prove that he could do it. His thoughts were a blur, his focus singular. Just keep running. But when he crossed the finish line, the last to do so, the guys were already laughing. Jay wiped his face with the back of his hand, and as he did, he saw them. The guys at the front, the ones who'd made it through first, standing in a tight circle, grinning at him like they'd just won something. "You think you can keep up, Carter?" One of them called out, laughing. "You're not even close, man. Why don't you just quit?" The laughter stung more than it should have. It hit somewhere deeper like a punch to the gut. But Jay didn't flinch. He couldn't. Dalton walked up to him, his face hard as stone, his eyes cold. "That's the last time you make us look bad, Carter. You're a liability. We don't need dead weight like you slowing us down." He turned and walked away without waiting for a response, the sound of his boots stomping across the dirt louder than any words. Jay didn't look up. His hands were shaking, but he clenched them into fists. He wanted to shout, to say something back. But what good would it do? They'd just laugh harder. So he stayed silent. He turned and walked back to the barracks, his heart heavy, his thoughts all over the place. His legs still ached from the run, but it was the weight of the insults that made him feel like he couldn't breathe. He passed Corporal Andrews on his way, the only one who hadn't joined in the mockery, but Andrews didn't say anything. He didn't look at Jay, just walked past him with his eyes straight ahead. The silence between them was like a wall. Later that day after chow, Jay found himself in the back of the mess hall again, sitting by himself. The air was thick with the smell of grease and spilled coffee, but it felt like it had all gotten quieter. Maybe it was the rain outside, or maybe it was the weight of everything he'd been carrying for the past few weeks. Either way, he couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was talking about him, even if they weren't. He heard someone laugh behind him. A couple of guys were standing near the door, whispering and pointing his way. What's he going to do next? Quit? Yeah. Or maybe he'll just stop trying, be the first one to give up. Jay couldn't take it anymore. He stood up fast, his chair scraping across the floor. The sound was like a shout in the room. They went quiet for a second, the way people do when they think someone's about to snap. He didn't snap, though. He just turned and walked out. Straight into the cold, the wet, the empty space that felt more familiar than the mess hall ever had. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he didn't care. He just needed to be somewhere else. It was after dark when the drill sergeant called him to the front again. Jay's stomach twisted. Another test. Another chance for Dalton to humiliate him. "You know the deal, Carter," Dalton sneered, eyes glinting with that familiar cruelty. "We're doing a team-building exercise. You're going to be the point man for the obstacle course. You screw it up again, and I'll make sure your ass is out of here faster than you can say failure." The others were standing nearby, waiting for their turn. They were all watching, and Jay knew it. He was last. The obstacle course was grueling, a mess of ropes, mud, and walls to climb, and Jay had been barely holding it together all day. But now, with all eyes on him, he felt the pressure tighten around his chest. Dalton gave him one last glare before the signal to start was given. Jay pushed himself forward, hands gripping the ropes, feet sliding in the mud. It felt like his body was betraying him, like every muscle had decided to check out. He slipped once, then twice, catching himself just in time. The laughter came, soft at first, then louder. "You're done, Carter," someone called from behind him. "Just give up." But something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to quit. Not here. Not now. With a grunt, Jay pulled himself up, over the wall, onto the next obstacle. Every step, every movement felt like it was burning him alive. But he wasn't stopping. Not anymore. He could hear the mocking voices behind him, but they faded into nothing as he pushed harder, faster. By the time he hit the last stretch of the course, he wasn't thinking about the pain anymore. He wasn't thinking about anything except finishing. And when he finally crossed the line, breath ragged, soaked in mud, Dalton stood there silent for the first time that day. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't anything more than survival. But it was enough. The others were standing around, their faces unreadable. And then, just as Jay thought the moment was going to slip by, Corporal Andrews stepped forward. Not a word, just a small nod of approval. And in that moment, Jay realized something that no one had told him yet. He didn't have to prove anything to them. He was enough. He just had to prove it to himself. As he walked back to the barracks, the weight in his chest lightened just a little bit. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. But maybe, just maybe, it was starting to make sense. And something told him, whatever came next, he was ready. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The sun was barely up, and the whole camp already felt like a furnace. The heat hit Jay's face like a slap as he climbed out of his cot, sweat trickling down his neck before he even stood up. The squad had been getting the hell kicked out of them for the past week. Non-stop drills, push-ups, sprints, obstacle courses, everything. But this morning there was something different in the air, like the tension was even thicker than usual. "All right, Carter." Sergeant Dalton's voice cut through the muggy air like a knife. "I've been watching you. You've barely kept up, but you're still here. You think that means you belong? You think you're cut out for this?" He stepped forward, towering over Jay. "Time to find out, huh?" The squad watched. Jay could feel their eyes burning through him. The laughter, the whispers, they didn't stop. But for once, he didn't feel that same sting. He didn't look down. He didn't shrink back. "I'm ready, Sergeant," Jay said, the words coming out steady, despite the rapid beating of his heart. Dalton's smirk was all teeth. "You'll be begging me to send you home after today, Carter. Bet on it." Jay didn't flinch. He knew this was coming. Everyone had been talking about it in the barracks last night. The big mission, the one that tested everything. His squad's first real combat simulation. They were sent out on a timed tactical exercise. Weapons were real, ammo was real, except the bullets. Everything else had to be executed with military precision. For most of the guys, this was the kind of thing they'd been trained for. For Jay, it felt like the weight of 1,000 eyes was on him, and he hated every second of it. They moved out as a unit, and Jay was stuck at the back, just like always. His steps felt heavier than they should have. He was trying to keep his breathing steady, trying not to feel the doubt creeping in again. His muscles were sore, his feet dragging. But he kept pushing, one foot in front of the other. It wasn't enough to just finish the mission. Not when every misstep would give Dalton another reason to make him feel small. As they moved deeper into the course, they hit the first obstacle, a sniper's position. They were supposed to neutralize the threat while staying covered. The others took off fast, sprinting across the terrain, looking like they knew exactly what they were doing. Jay tripped. His knee slammed into the dirt, and he felt a rush of humiliation flood his chest. There was that moment, the one that could make or break him. He had to push past it. He had to get up, no matter how much it hurt. He glanced around. No one was coming back for him. "Get up, Carter. You're going to get us all killed," Dalton shouted, his voice a sharp crack that cut through the chaos. He sounded like he was just waiting for Jay to fail. Jay pulled himself up, ignoring the sting in his knee, and took off after the squad. But every step felt like a battle. His gear was weighing him down. He could hear his breath coming in sharp bursts, feel his chest tightening. And then, just like that, they hit the next challenge, a building that was supposed to be cleared. Jay was supposed to breach the door and enter with the squad, but he wasn't fast enough. His hands were shaking too much to grip the door properly, and by the time he made his move, the others were already inside. He hesitated for a second, then forced himself through the doorway, ignoring the familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. He kept going, focused on his task, trying to push the thoughts out of his head. But it wasn't enough. By the time they reached the next point, the other squads had already finished. Jay's squad was way behind. Dalton's eyes were burning into him as they regrouped. "How does it feel, Carter?" Dalton asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're dead weight. We're behind because of you." He took a step forward, and Jay could feel the weight of his words like a physical blow. "You're not cut out for this. You never will be." Jay felt the heat in his face, the sting of failure so deep he thought it might break him. He didn't respond. What was there to say? He knew Dalton was right. He was dragging them down. It was like he was the one thing standing between his squad and the mission. Then, as if on cue, something snapped inside of him. He didn't even know where it came from, but all of a sudden Jay wasn't just going through the motions. His eyes flicked over to the next obstacle, the final one in the course. It was a long stretch, about a mile, and he could hear Dalton's voice barking orders, mocking him again. He didn't care. He couldn't care. Jay surged forward, pushing through the exhaustion, ignoring the fire in his lungs. He wasn't running just to finish. He wasn't running just to prove Dalton wrong. For the first time, Jay was running for himself. He barely noticed the others, except for one thing. Corporal Andrews, the one person who'd always stayed quiet but had never made him feel like a failure, was at the front of the pack, watching him. Andrews wasn't mocking him. He wasn't giving Jay the pitying look that everyone else gave him. Instead, he was watching him like he was waiting for something. Waiting for Jay to finally show what he was really capable of. It was like a switch flipped. Jay didn't slow down, didn't let the obstacles stop him. He kept going, his feet pounding against the earth, his mind clear of everything but the mission. And when he hit the final stretch, he was almost too tired to keep going. But there it was, that last bit of energy, the push that came from nowhere. He surged past the others, ignoring the way his body screamed at him. His lungs were on fire, but he kept going. When he crossed the finish line, breathless and covered in mud, Jay didn't know if it was a victory. He didn't know if anyone was even going to notice. But for the first time, he didn't care. He looked back, and he saw Dalton. The drill sergeant's face was tight, his jaw clenched. He had expected Jay to fall apart, but Jay hadn't. And then, as the squad caught up, Andrews was the first to nod. It wasn't much, but it was everything. His quiet approval hit Jay harder than any words could have. Dalton stood there, silent, eyes still locked on Jay. But the look had changed. It wasn't the look of someone who saw him as a failure anymore. It was something else, something between surprise and grudging respect. For the first time since this whole damn thing started, Jay stood tall. He didn't care about Dalton anymore. He didn't care about being the best. But he was done letting anyone tell him he couldn't do it. The moment wasn't over, not by a long shot, but something had shifted. And Jay knew, deep down, that no matter what happened next, he wasn't going to back down anymore. And there it was, the shift that would change everything. If this story resonates with you, Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The air was thick with tension. For the first time in weeks, there was a feeling of anticipation hanging over the squad, something that made Jay's stomach churn with uncertainty. The night before, everyone had been talking about the big briefing in the morning, the one that could change everything. Jay wasn't sure if it was a test or a joke, but he knew this would be the moment that decided whether he belonged or not. The squad gathered outside the briefing room. Everyone was talking in hushed tones, their voices low, almost conspiratorial. Sergeant Dalton was pacing in front of the doors, looking like he had a storm brewing inside him. "Carter," Dalton called, his voice hard like steel. "Get over here." Jay's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't been called out in days, not directly. The past few days had been different, quieter. After the last mission, after everything that happened, there was a shift. Some of the guys had stopped laughing. Some even nodded at him in the halls. But none of that meant a damn thing yet. Not until this moment. He walked over, standing at attention, trying to keep his hand steady. Dalton's gaze was cold as ever, but there was something different in the way he looked at Jay now. Like a predator trying to decide whether to eat or let go. "You're going to lead this one," Dalton said, his tone flat, like it was a fact, not a choice. Jay blinked, not sure if he'd heard him right. "Sir? Lead this mission. You're the point man." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "You fail, and that's it. You'll never get another chance. You'll be out of here before you know it." Jay felt the weight of the words pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't stupid. He knew what this was. This was Dalton's way of giving him one last chance to prove he wasn't just a liability. But it wasn't just about Jay anymore. If he screwed this up, everyone in the squad would pay for it. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes, sir." Dalton didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked into the briefing room, leaving Jay standing there with a sinking feeling in his gut. He wasn't sure if it was fear or anger, but something was boiling inside him. This was his moment, and if he failed, he knew it would be over. For him, for the whole squad. The briefing started in silence. Captain McAllister stood at the front, his face stern. The mission was simple. Breach an enemy stronghold, clear the area, and extract a target. Standard stuff, but it wasn't the mission that was weighing on Jay. It was the pressure, the eyes on him. The belief that if he screwed this up, it wasn't just his failure. It would be everyone's. Dalton's voice cut through the briefing, cold and commanding, like always. "Carter, you lead the squad. You're on the ground first. If you mess up, it's your ass." Jay took a breath, nodding, but the knot in his stomach was growing tighter with every passing second. "Understood, sir," he said. His voice was steady, but inside his mind was racing. This was it. There was no turning back now. The squad filed out, and Jay could feel the weight of their eyes on him as they headed to the transport vehicles. He kept his head down, focusing on his gear, his weapon. The hum of the engine was the only sound as they rode out to the mission site. He was trying to stay calm, to remember the drills, the tactics, but his thoughts kept circling back to Dalton's words. "You fail, and that's it." It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a reality. He had to get this right. The helicopter landed in the designated area, kicking up dirt and debris. Jay was the first one out, his boots hitting the ground hard. The team followed close behind, but he could hear the whispers, the silence that followed him. He had no choice now but to lead them. Jay took point, signaling for the team to move forward. The plan was simple. Breach the door, clear the building, and neutralize the threat. But every move felt like a test. His eyes darted around, scanning for anything out of place. His breath was steady, but inside his mind was a storm. The door was in sight. "Ready?" he asked, voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. He was the one giving orders now. This wasn't a drill anymore. This was real. They all nodded, weapons at the ready. Jay motioned for the breacher, who stepped forward to breach the door. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The breacher kicked the door open, and the squad rushed in, clearing the room as fast as possible. Jay moved with them, his eyes flicking over every corner, every shadow. But the building was eerily quiet. Too quiet. And then it hit him. "Trap!" he shouted, As the room exploded with gunfire, it was like everything slowed down. Jay hit the ground, his back to the wall, his rifle raised, eyes scanning for targets. His heart was racing, his hands shaking, but there was no time for that. Not now. "Move! Now!" Jay barked, his voice a force, cutting through the chaos. The squad moved as one, but Jay was already ahead, taking point as they pushed forward. He was the one leading them through the gunfire, the one making decisions on the fly, the one who had to keep them all alive. It wasn't perfect. He wasn't perfect. But it was enough. They cleared the building, taking down enemies as they moved, until finally the last one fell. Jay's chest was heaving, his mind still racing, but the silence that followed was deafening. "Good work, Carter," Captain McAllister said, his voice calm but approving. It was all Jay could do to keep from letting the relief flood through him. But he couldn't. Not yet. He had to finish the mission. They still had to extract the target. They moved out, heading for the extraction point. But it wasn't over yet. The moment they hit the clearing, a voice came over the radio. "This is command. We've got a change of plans. Do not move to extraction. We've got a situation." Jay's heart sank. He knew something wasn't right. The sudden shift. The urgency. "What's the situation?" Jay demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're on your own. The extraction team has been compromised. Get out, Carter. Now." The order hit like a punch to the gut. They were on their own now. No backup. No extraction team. Just the squad, stuck behind enemy lines. Dalton's voice came through the radio, cold as ever. "Carter, it's on you now. Lead them out. If you mess this up..." Jay clenched his jaw. He wasn't going to fail. Not today. They moved fast, trying to navigate their way out of the chaos, but every step felt like it was getting harder. Every decision weighed a little heavier, but Jay was holding it together. He had to. And then, when it seemed like they were close, disaster struck. A sniper. From nowhere. Jay barely saw the flash of the barrel. The shot rang out, and a squad member dropped. The whole group froze. "Cover!" Jay shouted, pushing forward. The shot had come from the high ground. Jay had to move, fast and with precision. Every move counted. They couldn't afford to wait. Without thinking, Jay made a snap decision. He wasn't waiting for orders. He was the one giving them. He sprinted forward, leading the charge, and somehow they took down the sniper. When the gunfire stopped, the silence was even worse. Jay's breath came in short bursts, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the moment hit him like a wave. He wasn't the weak recruit anymore. He wasn't the one they laughed at. He was the one who kept them alive. Dalton was silent on the radio for once, and Jay, he didn't need to hear anything more. "We're heading out," Jay said, his voice steady as rock. And this time he knew. He was the one in charge now. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The barracks were quieter than usual that evening. The buzz of idle chatter had faded, and now all that could be heard was the sound of boots shuffling and equipment being cleaned. It was late, and Jay stood by his locker, wiping down his gear. The day's mission was still fresh in his mind. The heat, the gunfire, the sound of his heart pounding in his ears. But something had shifted inside him, something that was hard to put into words. He wasn't the same guy who had walked in here weeks ago, the one mocked and dismissed by everyone, including himself. No, tonight he felt different. The weight of the past few weeks, the ridicule, the doubt, the endless struggle, hadn't disappeared, but they didn't define him anymore. The door to the barracks opened with a creak, and Sergeant Dalton stepped inside. The room went silent. Everyone froze, knowing that the drill sergeant wasn't one to enter without a purpose. Jay turned slowly, his eyes meeting Dalton's. The same cold, calculated look from before. But tonight, something was different. Dalton's usual smugness was gone. He didn't speak at first, just stood there surveying the room, taking in the squad. The air seemed to thicken, the tension almost unbearable. Then Dalton's eyes landed on Jay. "Carter," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, not laced with the usual venom. "Get over here." Jay walked toward him, his steps measured, his heart still hammering but in a different way now. Dalton didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Jay, sizing him up. There was something in his gaze, something that wasn't there before. It wasn't mockery or disgust, but something closer to respect. "You did good out there," Dalton said, the words surprising Jay more than he cared to admit. "I didn't think you had it in you." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But you earned your place here, and that's not something I say lightly." Jay could feel the weight of those words sinking in. This was the same man who had torn him down day after day, the same man who had doubted his every move. Now standing before him, Jay wasn't sure how to feel. A part of him wanted to feel vindicated, to let the anger out, but another part of him just felt tired. Tired of fighting for approval, tired of constantly having to prove himself. "Thanks, Sergeant," Jay said quietly, his voice steady, even though his mind was racing. Dalton nodded, then turned to address the whole squad. "Everyone listen up," he barked. The room fell even more silent, all eyes now on him. "Carter's earned his place. He's not the weak link anymore. He's one of us now. That's how this works. You prove yourself. You belong. But don't think for 1 second that it gets easier. You've all got a long way to go." There was a long pause, a moment of uncertainty. And then, from the back of the room, Corporal Andrews stepped forward. It was a small thing, a simple gesture, just a nod. But in that moment, it was everything. The others had noticed it too. The change. The way the squad now saw Jay, not as the guy who barely kept up, but as someone who had fought for his spot. No one laughed anymore. No one mocked. They simply acknowledged the truth. Jay's eyes met Andrews for a brief second, and the unspoken understanding between them was enough. Andrews had seen it from the beginning. He knew Jay had it in him, even when no one else did. And now in the silence that followed Dalton's words, that was all that mattered. The night carried on, but Jay's mind wasn't fully there anymore. He was still processing everything that had happened. It wasn't about proving himself to Dalton or anyone else. It had never been about that. It had always been about finding something inside himself, about realizing that he didn't need to shrink anymore. Later, as the squad filtered out, Jay lingered behind. He stood by the door, taking a moment to let everything settle in. The weight, the pressure, the constant feeling of being watched. It had all been unbearable. But now he felt like he was finally breathing again. Dalton walked past him without a word. But as he did, he gave Jay a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. Jay's chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. And for the first time, he could see a future here. One that didn't come with shame or regret, but with the quiet pride of knowing he had earned every step forward. When he left the barracks that night, the world felt different. The air was cooler, the stars brighter. And as he walked back to his bunk, his boots echoing softly against the concrete, Jay realized something important. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a part of something bigger, and that meant everything. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the weight of doubt had been lifted. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the base, Jay stood alone beneath the American flag. The colors rippled in the wind, the red, white, and blue standing tall against the fading light. It was a quiet moment, one that didn't need words. In the distance, the sound of boots marching echoed through the barracks, but Jay was still. His eyes were steady, focused on the flag, as if the wind itself carried all the weight of his journey. Every misstep, every ridicule, every victory. And then, without a word, Sergeant Dalton passed by. For the first time, his usual sneer was replaced by a subtle nod. Not the kind of nod given to a subordinate, but one shared between equals. That was all, a silent acknowledgement. But it was enough. Jay held his ground, a sense of peace settling over him, knowing that the battle within had been won, not by force, but by the quiet strength that came from perseverance and dignity. In this life, there will always be those who try to break you down, whether it's through prejudice, mockery, or the weight of unjust expectations. But it's what you do when you're pushed to the edge that defines you. You see, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But it's your choices in those moments that shape who you become. Jay chose to stand tall, to show up for himself when no one else would. In the end, it's not about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about the integrity to keep going when it feels like everything is against you. We all face challenges, but we don't do it alone. Brotherhood, loyalty, and resilience are the backbone of what makes us stronger, not just as soldiers, but as human beings. If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your experiences, or let us know what you took away from Jay's journey. Don't forget to hit the like button to show your support, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the true meaning of honor and sacrifice. Keep walking forward, stay strong, and remember, actions speak louder than words.